A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Folks, we have a ton to catch up on since I was not with you all last week. Obviously, we're going to address the Breonna Taylor grand jury decision. We will talk about Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing and the fight that is about to take place with the nomination of her replacement. And we will get into the driving forces behind the riots, Black Lives Matter. And also, the president has signed or is about to sign some interesting executive orders, so we will get into all of that and more straight ahead. Now, before we get into the news of the day, I want to get into some Second Amendment news. That was the basis for starting this podcast a couple of years ago in the first place. And with the silly election season upon us, national politics has kind of taken over because it is very important. But it all ties in, and I want us to get back to focusing on the Second Amendment, even as the election approaches, because, like I said, it is all of vital importance and ties in together. So there's a few stories I want to talk about. The first one is something that happened a few months ago. So it's an older story, but now that schools are back in session virtually, it's worth talking about. So back in June, a Maryland fifth grader was attending his class online when the teacher saw a gun hanging on his wall in the background. The horror. He didn't ask the kid what it was. He didn't call his mother. Nothing like that. He called 911. So, of course, the police show up and immediately, upon seeing the guns in the room, recognize that they were BB guns and airsoft guns. But it doesn't really matter whether they were real or fake. The school should have reached out to the parents before sending the police to violate their Fourth Amendment rights. Schools want to be the sole source of children's education, but it's stuff like this that's going to cause parents to pull their kids out of this madness. Now, the second story I want to talk about is something that is often overlooked when discussing the Second Amendment, and it's that the Second Amendment covers knives as well. It's the right to keep and bear arms. It doesn't specify firearms. And of course, back when it was written, citizens could have every type of weapon that the government had at its disposal, as it should be, but I digress. There was a case before the Federal District Court of Hawaii, Teeter versus Connors, where the court actually acknowledged that knives are covered under the Second Amendment, but then turned right around and upheld the state's law banning butterfly knives as constitutional. This pretty much ignores Heller, which holds that bans on any weapon in common use for lawful purposes is unconstitutional. Butterfly knives, switchblades, stilettos, they all should be legal to carry and own. And the next story I want to talk about, and this is in Who Could Have Ever Seen This Coming news, back on September 2nd, a man in Frederick County, Virginia, had his gun seized when his father and son accused him of pulling a gun on the son. The grandfather, took out an emergency protective order, which has since expired, and a substantial cause hearing was held, and the man's father didn't show up. So his guns were returned. Now keep in mind, he was not charged with any crime, yet he still had his property taken from him. This is why these red flag laws are so problematic. The father said that his son had lied to the police and explained that his son had held a grudge against him because a couple of years ago he called the police because his son was having drugs delivered to the house. Now, since neither the son nor the grandfather showed up for this hearing, and there was no evidence to substantiate the claim, the judge ordered that the father's guns be returned. They never should have been taken in the first place. Now, there's a bit of breaking news because as I was preparing for this show, the president formally nominated Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. All indications are that she will interpret the Constitution and the Second Amendment cases as a strict originalist. But we'll talk more about that later on in the show. All right, let's move on because, like I said, there is a ton that I want to get to. I'm not sure if we will, but we'll try. So as you no doubt know by now, the grand jury came back in the Breonna Taylor case and did not charge any of the officers with murder. They did charge Brett Hankerson with wanton endangerment for firing shots that wound up in the apartment adjacent to Taylor's, where a man, a pregnant woman, and a child were present. That's fair. You need to know what your backstop is when you're sending rounds downrange. But of course, fairness doesn't matter because Black Lives Matter and all the other race hustlers and race pimps invested in stoking racial tensions for reasons that don't have crap to do with equality. If fairness were a consideration, the media would be reporting that Taylor was still heavily involved in her ex's drug trafficking operation. They would put that information out there. They would publish the report to try and quell these riots. But that's not what they want. Leftists want these riots to keep jumping off. But before we get into that, let's get to the facts of the case as laid out by the Attorney General Daniel Cameron.
Evidence shows that officers both knocked and announced their presence at the apartment. The officers' statements about their announcement are corroborated by an independent witness who was near in proximity to apartment 4. In other words, the warrant was not served as a no-knock warrant. I think it is worth repeating again that our investigation found that Mattingly and Cosgrove were justified in their use of force after having been fired upon by Kenneth Walker. After hearing the evidence from our team of prosecutors, the grand jury voted to return an indictment against Detective Hankerson for 3 counts of wanton endangerment for wantonly placing the 3 individuals in apartment 3 in danger of serious physical injury or death. While there are 6 possible homicide charges under Kentucky law, these charges are not applicable to the facts before us because our investigation showed, and the grand jury agreed, that Mattingly and Cosgrove were justified in the return of deadly fire after having been fired upon by Kenneth Walker. Let me state that again. According to Kentucky law, the use of force by Mattingly and Cosgrove was justified to protect themselves. This justification bars us from pursuing criminal charges in Miss Breonna Taylor's death.
So there you have it. Well thought out, expressed properly, and in accordance with Kentucky law. But as with fairness, law doesn't matter. The only law these people recognize is whatever they feel is appropriate. Listen to these fools on MSDNC.
Well, listen, not only is he being intellectually dishonest about that, I find all of his remarks with regards to this whole entire press conference offensive. And let me just speak to this whole celebrity influencer thing. While they can't speak for Kentuckians, let me say this as a Black woman. He does not speak for Black folks. He's skin folk, but he is not kinfolk. And so just like he thinks they can't speak for Kentucky because he's up there with a black face, he does not speak for all of us. This was not a tragedy. This was a murder. He should be ashamed of himself.
I'm so disgusted by this. I'm so disgusted by Daniel Cameron's performance. I am so sick and tired of Black people going on the air and performing for violence and white supremacy and state-sponsored violence against Black people and claiming they're mamas and claiming they're because of Black men, they care about it. This woman got shot in her house when she was asleep.
Just ridiculous. Here's Jason Johnson trying to perpetuate the lie that she was shot in her sleep. And he must have missed that part of the press conference where Cameron said that the officers saw them both in the hallway. And that was the statement that her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, gave as well. So he's just lying to you. He's flat out lying to you, which is par for the course over there. But this is what I wonder. Now, on the screen right now, you're seeing the U-Haul that showed up with signs and shields and other paraphernalia right after the decision was announced. They knew the decision was probably going to come down this way, and Soros had them prepared. Now, I know you're not supposed to invoke George Soros' name because that makes you an anti-Semite. Let me just say, and be perfectly clear, I don't care what his ethnic or religious background is. He is financing people bent on destroying this country, and that is the source of my criticism of George Soros. That's it. So we will mention him whenever it is appropriate, and it's appropriate in this case. Now, this woman rented the U-Haul, and she works for the Bail Project in Louisville. The Bail Project is a group that pays the bail of these protesters to get them out and back on the trail of destruction. And they bail out other criminals too, but the Bail Project is backed by George Soros. Now, shortly after she distributed this riot paraphernalia, two Louisville Metro Police Department officers were shot. One was shot in the abdomen just below his vest, and the other was shot in the hip. Now, both are expected to make full recoveries, thank God. And they did arrest the shooter shortly after the incident, and he's going to be charged with 2 counts of first-degree assault of a police officer and 14 counts of wanton endangerment, all against police officers. Now, I think he needs to be charged with attempted murder of 16 police officers. Now, I know they're soft-pedaling the charges to try and squelch the riots, but the riots are already going on. So go all in. Hit him with the whole truckload. Now, all told, there were 130 arrests made in Louisville that night. But it wasn't just in Louisville where these riots broke out. Check out how they rioted in Seattle. That looks like attempted murder to me. The Seattle Police Department showed the helmet that the officer was wearing and how it was cracked. And had he not been wearing that helmet, that officer would very likely be dead or at the very least suffering from some severe brain damage. Now check out how they rioted in Portland. Again, attempted murder of many police officers. Now, between this, the LA County deputies that were shot a couple weeks ago, Deputy Ryan Hendricks of Henderson County, North Carolina, and the numerous other police officers and deputies who have been assaulted or killed in the line of duty. And then you have the Soros-funded district attorneys who refuse to prosecute criminals like Larry Krasner in Philly, and Kim Gardner in St. Louis, and Chesa Boudin in San Francisco. You don't have just a war on the police, but you have a fully engaged war on the rule of law. Now, switching gears here for a second, the president promised a couple of executive orders last week, one of which was aimed at protecting babies born alive in a botched abortion attempt. Now, I was under the impression that this was already law. I mean, how is it not? Well, right now, the bill that I thought had been passed is called the Born Alive Protection Act, and it's in the Senate right now. And it's something that needs to be put into law, and that it hasn't been is troubling. Now, I'm not a huge fan of executive orders. In this case, I get it. And if you're pro-life, you have to like it on some level. And even if you can't stand Trump, if you're pro-life, there's no way you can vote for Biden. And if you love this country and want to protect children, you can't stay home on Election Day. Because not voting, because you don't like the president's personality or tweets, you need to get over that. And you need to get over it quick. There's entirely too much at stake. And we're about to highlight what that is right now. Because the second executive order he promised was combating the left-wing indoctrination of children in schools. Now, in his remarks, it was not the best speech in terms of delivery. It was quite subdued, and that may have been a function of the event or being unprompted or a combination of the two. But the content of his remarks was outstanding.
The left has warped, distorted, and defiled the American story with deceptions, falsehoods, and lies. There is no better example than the New York Times totally discredited 1619 Project. This project rewrites American history to teach our children that we were founded on the principle of oppression, not freedom. Nothing could be further from the truth. America's founding set in motion the unstoppable chain of events that abolished slavery, secured civil rights, defeated communism and fascism, and built the most fair, equal, and prosperous nation in human history.
And of course, he is exactly right. It's something that I've said numerous times on this show. We are the best, most free, well, most free for now anyway, most prosperous nation the world has ever seen. And I don't normally play a lot from a single speech like this, but like I said, the content was outstanding, and I just want to play this little bit as well.
The left is attempting to destroy that beautiful vision and divide Americans by race in the service of political power. By viewing every issue through the lens of race, they want to impose a new segregation, and we must not allow that to happen. Critical race theory, the 1619 Project, and the crusade against American history is toxic propaganda, ideological poison that, if not removed, will dissolve the civic bonds that tie us together, will destroy our country.
Once again, the president nailed it. The left is attempting to destroy this country and remake it in their ugly image. And they know they can't hold on to power in a country that's united. So they have to divide us. And critical race theory and intersectionality are some of their most potent weapons. And they're able to wield them with such effectiveness right now because they took over our education system and started indoctrinating our children. Which is why I really appreciate this idea.
Today, I'm also pleased to announce that I will soon sign an executive order establishing a national commission to promote patriotic education. It will be called the 1776 Commission. It will encourage our educators to teach our children about the miracle of American history and make plans to honor the 250th anniversary of our founding.
Now, I wish he had worded that differently. I know what he's getting at, and it's a laudable goal. But calling it patriotic education sounds like indoctrination in the other direction. But if you teach children our true history, the bad and the good, the mistakes and the triumphs, the patriotism is going to come naturally. It has to. We don't want to teach children what to think. As conservatives, we value teaching them to think. Present the information, teach them how to think critically and analyze the information. That's education. But even though it was worded clumsily, I grant it, I still think it's a good thing to combat the left's indoctrination. And I think as much as they love the Chinese virus for affording them the opportunity to seize even more power and control, I think it's shining a light on the education system and what they're trying to do. And I think that when schools finally reopen fully, you'll see enrollment drop, as in public schools anyway, as parents seek alternatives like homeschooling and pod schools, or they may just bite the bullet and send their kids to private school. And this is the best way to beat the left back long term. Because what we're seeing right now is a result of the left's indoctrination of children in schools. So we need to flip that. And so that the next generation is a more conservative lot that actually respects the Constitution. Now, as I mentioned in my story last week or a couple weeks ago where I announced that there wasn't going to be a show last week, I expressed my sympathies for the family of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I agreed with her on virtually nothing politically. I think that there may have been a couple of Supreme Court decisions where she came down on the right side. I can't recall what those might have been at the moment. But she was seen as some great champion for women. But her stance on abortion was decidedly anti-woman, which is why I didn't write a flowery tribute or say much beyond extending condolences to her family. I just couldn't do it. I respect the gravity of her passing, and I wanted to show respect for her and her family, but that was as far as I could go. The same can't be said for her supporters, though. When the president and first lady went to pay their respects, check this out. Now, how disrespectful was that? The Trump derangement syndrome is off the charts. His presence just causes them to lose their minds and disrespect their idol, the notorious RBG. Contrast that with the president's reaction when he heard about her passing.
She just died? Wow. I didn't know that. You're telling me now for the first time. She led an amazing life. What else can you say? She was an amazing woman. Whether you agreed or not, she was an amazing woman who led an amazing life. I'm actually sad to hear that. I am sad to hear that. Thank you very much.
I think that was handled perfectly. Of course, social media lit up with calling him fake and a sociopath, and he didn't really mean it, and blah, blah, blah. I really wish I could tell some of these lunatics how stupid they really are, but you can't do that because someone who's persuadable could be watching the interaction, and you don't want to scare them away by matching their vitriol with your own. But it's tough sometimes. And of course, this brings up the fight for the vacancy left by Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death. Should they or should they not fill it? Well, here's the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg on that very topic.
The president is elected for 4 years, not 3 years, so the power that he has in year 3 continues into year 4, and maybe some members of the Senate will wake up and appreciate that that's how it should be.
This was during the fight they had after Justice Scalia died and President Obama nominated Merrick Garland to the court, which is why I'm not buying the whole dying wish nonsense. I doubt she said that, and there is no dying wish provision in the Constitution. Contrary to what your and my leftist friends say, it is not hypocritical to fill the seat this close to the election when they didn't hold the hearings then for Garland. Republicans held the Senate. They opposed President Obama. Their role is to advise and consent on judicial appointments. Obama himself said elections have consequences. The people that elected a majority Republican Senate expected them then to oppose Obama. Now they expect them to support Trump. And as I said on social media a lot, leftists have Harry Reid to thank for this because he's the one, when he was majority leader, who changed the Senate rules to make it a simple majority enough to confirm federal appointments. Before that, it was 60. So some sort of compromise would have had to be reached to confirm these justices. McConnell said then,
once again, Senate Democrats are threatening to break the rules of the Senate, in order to change the rules of the Senate. If you want to play games, set yet another precedent that you'll no doubt come to regret. Say to my friends on the other side of the aisle, you'll regret this, and you may regret it a lot sooner than you think.
And here we are. Appointing Supreme Court justices is one of the biggest reasons why conservatives voted for Trump in the first place, and why they will again in November. And now the president has nominated Amy Coney Barrett to fill her seat. The attacks on her started back when she was being considered for the spot that Kavanaugh now holds. They think her Catholic faith is problematic because the left believes that abortion is a religious issue for conservatives, and in some cases it is. But they believe that will be the key to overturning Roe versus Wade. They say this every time a Republican gets to nominate a Supreme Court justice. I talked about this before with Kavanaugh. We have been disappointed at pretty much every turn when it comes to Supreme Court nominees. Kennedy was appointed by Reagan and was supposed to be conservative, and he's been a pretty reliable liberal. Roberts was supposed to be an originalist, and he's pretty much a leftist activist as much as the rest of them, or any of them. Gorsuch has been solid. Kavanaugh's been pretty squishy. Alito and Thomas are the most reliably originalist in their opinions. So getting worked up over Amy Coney Barrett's nomination is alarmist and premature. History shows us that justices have often veered left once they get on the Supreme Court. Now, we've been telling you for a while now that Black Lives Matter as an organization is Marxist. And they are intent on tearing down this country and all that it stands for in favor of a Marxist vision of a black utopia. They used to be unapologetic in that stance. It even said so on their website, on the What We Believe page. But see, now you can't go look at it because for some inexplicable reason, they took it down. Now, why do you think that is? Why would what you believe need to be taken down? Do you no longer believe it? Or do you realize that what you believe is corrosive and toxic? And the people that you need to win over to your side would never be on board with that. Let's take a look. No, wait, we can't. Well, thanks to the Wayback Machine archive, I was able to retrieve a copy. And I downloaded a copy of it, and I'll link to the archive and possibly have a copy of it on the libertycast.net. But I'm just going to highlight a few of the best passages. We practice empathy. We engage comrades with the intent to learn about and connect with their contexts. Meanwhile, Black Lives Matter rioters are blocking traffic, pulling people out of their cars to beat them down, destroying businesses, some of which are black-owned businesses, by the way, and generally just being a-holes. But we never hear anyone from the organization denouncing any of this behavior. Lies. Here's a really good one. We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another. Disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family? They fully embraced the government's model where they incentivize women to have children out of wedlock so that the government can step in and support them. And it's not like they're substituting Black Lives Matter for the government. They haven't helped support single mothers to any significant degree at all that I've been able to find. They're just affirming the leftist agenda, which kind of makes sense when you realize that all the money that they've raised is going to fund leftist candidates, so there's that. But here's the best one, and perhaps the most demonstrably untrue. We embody and practice justice, liberation, and peace in our engagements with one another. Come on. I can pick numerous examples of people who would completely disagree with that. And some of them can't because they're dead. But just in general, 6 months of riots blows that statement completely out of the water, doesn't it? Of course it does. Riots are not justice, liberating, or peaceful. They are by definition lawless and the exact opposite of peaceful. But why take this page down? Do they, as I said, recognize that their beliefs are toxic? Are they trying to catch more flies with honey than vinegar? It's not going to work. Taking down a webpage isn't going to do it. Black Lives Matter, foot soldiers' actions on the ground during these riots, and the fact that no one from the organization has denounced the riots done in their name, screams their common cause, their approval of the riots. Okay, moving on. Well, kinda, because we're still going to be talking about race. There was another executive order that the president signed. He signed this executive order. It might have been an executive memo, but this memo or order bans trainings at federal agencies that push critical race theory. Now, to understand why this is a good thing, let me just give you the 30,000-foot view of critical race theory. And I'm no expert. I've only been in the past few months become aware of critical race theory. And before I ever talked about it on the show, I wanted to make sure that I understood it myself. Because it's so foreign. And when I first heard about it and started reading about it, it just seemed so ridiculous on its face. And I couldn't believe what I was learning. There are people who have actually built careers on this madness. But anyway, critical race theory at its roots is rooted in Marxism. And I'm starting to see a trend here, but in a nutshell, it posits that racism is ingrained in the fabric of America. It exists everywhere in American life, so much so that we don't even realize that we harbor these racist views and tendencies. And I say we because I'm an American, but critical race theory says that it's only white people, mostly in positions of power, who can be racist. Critical race theory allows for individuals to be racist, but it also says that it's a way of life that is embedded in our institutions, systems, and culture. But leftists control these institutions and systems like Hollywood and academia and corporate America and so on. So if racism is so ingrained, whose fault is that? Critical race theory says that the system as it is right now cannot end racism. It's a never-ending cycle of perpetuating racism while providing an excuse for racism. Minority opinions on the system are more relevant than white opinions. And since white people have enjoyed control of the system and have an interest in maintaining it, their opinions on it are less valid than minority opinions. Now, just so you understand that what I'm saying is not just what I think, but it's based on their own words. Here's a bullet point from a website, dismantlingracism.org. We cannot dismantle racism in a system that exploits people for private profit. If we want to dismantle racism, then we must build a movement for economic justice. This right here demonstrates that the incoherence of critical race theory. It's not exploitation to get paid for your work. Business owners are in business to make money, are they not? Are they not allowed to provide for their families? Are they not allowed to try and build something to pass on to their children and grandchildren? And what about black millionaires and billionaires? They provide jobs. Isn't that the goal? If they don't have the means to provide jobs, where does this economic justice come from? Well, they are Marxists, so presumably the government. And the president, he banned these trainings for government agencies, these trainings that teach that all white people contribute to racism, or where they are required to say that they benefit from racism. These trainings also teach that there is racism embedded in the belief that America is the land of opportunity and the belief that the most qualified person should get the job. This is an evil, toxic ideology, and the president did the right thing by banning it from government facilities. Now, that doesn't mean that private businesses won't pick up the slack, though. All right, I want to move on to another story that I wanted to touch on. And those of us who have been against mask mandates saw this coming. We told you this was going to be the next logical step. The authoritarians who believe that they have the power to impose these mandates will use that power that they think they have to force you into compliance. And here's a case in point. A woman named Alicia Kitts in Ohio was arrested for not wearing a mask outside at a football game. Now, the video is on my YouTube and Rumble channels, but here's a little bit of that.
Tase somebody over a mask. Tasing this lady over not wearing a damn mask.
Now, for our audio-only listeners, a woman is sitting at her son's football game, and the school resource officer is arresting her. And that scream you heard, and you may have actually been able to make out the sound, but he tased her for resisting arrest. Now, you know me. I am 100% back the blue, but this is madness. This guy's on a power trip, and the department is standing behind him, though, saying that she wasn't arrested for not wearing a mask, but for trespassing after she was asked to leave and didn't, and for resisting arrest. Nice try. But the mask is what started the entire interaction. Now, how did we get to this point? How did this happen? Somehow, as a country, we've become compliant, complacent, and too many of us value safety and security over liberty. Well, I'm here to tell you that I do not. Liberty is one of the founding principles that this country holds dear. James Wilson said that without liberty, law loses its nature and its name and becomes oppression. Without law, liberty also loses its nature and its name and becomes licentiousness. We're seeing both sides of that coin play out right now with these leftists just letting rioters run roughshod all over their cities and states. But that's a separate issue that we'll touch on a little later. I always try to base my positions on the facts at hand, on data, science. So what is the science behind these mask mandates? Well, the Chinese virus can't travel through the air for more than 6 feet, so social distancing is supposed to keep us safe, right? Not so fast, my friend, because the WHO recommends 1 meter for social distancing, which is just over 3 feet. So which is it? Does the Chinese virus behave differently in Europe, where they follow the metric system and the WHO's recommendations? I'm no epidemiologist, but I'm going to guess no. But then there's the confusion about masks. N95 masks were the only ones that worked. Then those flimsy surgical masks were what we needed. And then neck gaiters and bandanas were a way to go. Now, of course, they're saying that they don't offer any protection and may be worse than not wearing one at all. I can't keep up. But you can't have it both ways. You can't, on one hand, say that the science is clear, and then have different organizations give us different guidelines based on the same science. You can't say that masks serve only to make people feel better, as Fauci said, and then say that everyone should wear one. You can't say that N95 masks offer the best protection, but don't go buy one because some other folks might need them. The science is all over the place. And then there are the medical conditions that are supposed to exempt you from these unconstitutional mask mandates. Asthma is one of those conditions. Alicia Kitts has asthma. before we get you out of here, we have to give you your weekly dose of Joe Biden meltdowns. Now, first, here's one where he actually sounds coherent, but provides a soundbite that should be used for a Trump ad.
What is your role as vice president in charge of policy in Ukraine and your son's job in Ukraine? How is that not a conflict of interest?
It's not a conflict of interest. There's been no indication of any conflict of interest from Ukraine or anywhere else. Period. I'm not going to respond to that. Let's focus on the problem. Focus on this man, what he's doing that no president has ever done. No president.
See, let's talk about what this man and what he's done that no other president has done. Booming economy, lowest black unemployment rate ever, peace agreements in the Middle East. I mean, we could go on. But anyway, here's a montage of some of his greatest hits.
You know, the rapidly rising I don't know. That's why I've made it a priority my entire career to work closely with you. From the time I got to the Senate 180 years ago, you know, as well as my tenure as vice president. Appreciate it. For example, the Paycheck Protection Act. You know, 1% of the money's gone out. 1%. 1% of the that's not the paycheck. The bill for small businesses. Lending. Mainstream lending. 1%'s gone out. And but look, it's been done. We're going to get the election results about another week or so after this. I forget the date, the 13th. And I think that I think if there is an election, if there was an election, if people, depending how many showed up, I think I will have done well. But who knows? We're going to find that out. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by go. You know the thing.
That pretty much says it all. But here's a kicker, though. And this one is old. It's from 2016, but it just surfaced. And it just illustrates how bad this guy's judgment is.
I have incredibly good judgment. One, I married Jill. And two, I appointed Johnson to the Academy. I just want you to know that. Let's clap for that, you stupid bastard. Man, you are a dull bunch. Must be slow here, man.
Anyway, folks, that's our show. I will try to do better the next time. But thank you all for watching or listening. If you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, if you prefer that, because our tech overlords over at YouTube, take a second to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. If you'd rather listen, because I have a face for radio, you can check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, or whichever podcast platform you prefer. And please like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review. I would really appreciate that. We're also on the internet. You can find us at thelibertycast.net. Go to the podcast page and you'll find all the latest podcasts. We're also on the rightway.site. And of course, you can find us on social media, Parler, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Liberty Cast on all 4 platforms. But again, thank you all for taking some time to spend with me, whether you're watching or listening. And until next time, keep your head on a swivel and stay safe, everybody.